Listen, I'm making this video as a reminder to myself, because perfectionism is something that I struggle with day in and day out. It's the kind of problem that feels like a strength. Like, who wouldn't want their work to be perfect, or at least really good? Reality is, it's not helping you. It's not helping you at all. If you're someone who redoes the same line 10 times, or can't finish a piece because it doesn't feel right, trust me, I've been there. I tend to think that I'm just being detail-oriented, but I'm not, okay? And I realize that the real culprit of this issue is fear. Fear of failing or being judged, not living up to my own expectations. That's perfectionism at its core. Fear disguised as high standards. And the worst part, it makes creating feel like a chore instead of something you actually enjoy. And this is something that I deal with every single time that I draw. So today, we're going to dive into why perfectionism is ruining your art, and more importantly, how to let it go. Perfectionism isn't just about trying to make your art good. It's about avoiding failure. It tricks you into thinking, if this isn't perfect, it's not worth showing or even finishing. Actually, the piece in the background here is an example of something that I worked on for days. It was finals week, and this was the last illustration that I needed to get done for my illustration intensive class. It was for a self-driven project where basically we could choose whatever we wanted to do. So I decided, hey, I'm going to do some editorial stuff, meaning each week I'd look at a different news article and make an illustration based on it. So this one was about some astronomers in India discovering a solar system with 3 suns that orbit each other. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty cool article, and I don't think I've said it before, but I am currently in art school and I'm about to graduate soon. But anyways, you'll probably see at the end that every time that I thought I was done, I'd find something else to tweak, whether it's the lighting not being dramatic enough, or even the beginning, the pose felt stiff, or the colors didn't pop, so I kept fussing around with the hue saturation slider. By the time I finally called it done, I hated it. I'd spent so long obsessing over tiny details that I lost the original spark that made me want to draw in the first place. And I know I'm not alone in this. Perfectionism slows you down. It makes you second guess everything. Worst of all, it stops you from learning because you're afraid to make mistakes, and mistakes are where the real growth happens. It's also worth pointing out that perfectionism isn't sustainable. If you're constantly chasing flawless, you'll eventually burn out. You'll avoid trying new things because you don't want to risk failing. And what am I going to say, guys? You can't improve if you're afraid to experiment. Perfectionism convinces you that your work isn't ready, but the truth is, nothing you create will ever feel 100% perfect. And that's okay. As hard as it is to say, it's okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Let's talk about this idea of perfect for a second. What does that even mean? Because obviously, it's completely made up. Once again, think about your favorite artists. Some of them probably have super clean, polished work, while others lean into raw, messy energy. Neither is more perfect than the other. It's all about style, emotion, and how it connects with the audience. If someone like Van Gogh did photorealism instead of his iconic style that we know him for, I think the world would be way less interesting. And your art, it doesn't need to look like anyone else's to have value. Perfectionism is rooted in comparison. We're scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, seeing these polished pieces, and it feels like everyone else has it all figured out. But what you're seeing is the end result, not the process. You're not seeing their messy sketches, the experiments that didn't work, or the moments that they wanted to quit. Honestly, the art that I connect with the most isn't the flawless, over-rendered stuff. It's the pieces that feel human. And that's probably the most important aspect of art that we need to preserve in the year of 2025. The ones where you can see the artist's hand in it, where it feels raw and real. So how do we break out of this perfectionist trap? How do we start creating with less fear and more freedom? Number 1 is to reframe your goals. This one is especially for me. Stop aiming to be perfect and start aiming to be finished. Set a goal to complete something, even if it's messy, even if it's not your best work. Remember, every piece you finish teaches you something, and that's way more valuable than one perfect piece. Number 2, work in layers. This is something that I do all the time, obviously. Start with the basics. Get the idea down first, even if it's ugly. Then, like what I talked about in the last video, refine it step by step while staying flexible. It's easier to edit something that exists rather than making it perfect on the first try. Number 3, embrace mistakes. This one's tough, but it's also important. Instead of seeing mistakes as failures, see them as part of the process. Some of the most interesting things in my art have come from accidents, especially in the coloring phase. Like, I'll open up the hue saturation slider and crank it, and wow, that actually looks better than I envisioned it. And then it adds to this cool vibe that I never even planned for, you know? Tip number 4, give yourself a time limit. This is actually something that I've seen work firsthand. I was in a character design class last semester, and we'd frequently have activities where we had an hour to design a character based on some random prompt, like design a character based on 3 random words that we pick out of a hat. So here I got grumpy, dog, and business person. And so I have an hour to make something unique with that. And here's what I ended up with, if you're wondering. And, you know, obviously the line art isn't perfect. It's, you know, it's sketchy, it's pretty simple, but that's what we're going for. Just producing something. And then, okay, it's time to wrap this up, and I'm moving on. It forces you to focus on the big picture instead of obsessing over little details. And number 5 is something that I've personally found helpful as well, is getting feedback early. Sometimes perfectionism comes from working in a vacuum, right? So it's helpful, if you want to, share your work with someone that you trust, even if it's not finished. I don't really stand by unsolicited critique, so you can ask them to point things out that are great or some things that need work, things like that, even if you can't see them yet. So yeah, here's the thing. Perfectionism doesn't make you a better artist. It just makes you a more stressed out one. If you let it go, you'll create more, grow faster, and actually enjoy the process again. Your art doesn't have to be flawless to matter. It just has to be yours. So the next time that you're working on something and that little voice says, it's not good enough, tell it it's good enough for now, then finish it and move on. So what about you? How has perfectionism held you back? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories or other video topics that you want me to go over. And if this hit home, make sure you're subscribed because I'm trying to build something cool here. I think next time we're tackling the problem with comparing yourself to other artists. So I'll see you then. Bye.